Chapter 7. Preparation for Battle. Night retreated reluctantly before the advancing dawn, stars fading one by one as the eastern sky brightened from black to deep indigo. In the practice area behind Toru's forge, the 5 ronin had gathered well before first light, each preparing for the coming challenge according to his nature. Kenji, as the chosen first combatant, occupied the center of the space. He moved through a series of warm-up exercises that blended elements from multiple sword schools, his usual casual demeanor replaced by focused intensity. Each movement flowed into the next with liquid precision, his blade tracing patterns in the pre-dawn air that seemed to defy conventional swordsmanship. The others formed a loose circle around him, observing with professional assessment while conducting their own preparations. Hiroshi methodically inspected Kenji's armor, making minor adjustments to ensure optimal protection without sacrificing mobility. Masaru demonstrated defensive postures specifically adapted to counter four-armed attacks, his movements precise and economical. Daichi worked through his 2 sword forms in the background, his concentration so complete he seemed unaware of the others around him. Takeshi moved among them, offering quiet suggestions and occasional corrections. Despite not being the first to face the aliens in formal combat, he had assumed the role of coordinator, his battlefield experience providing structure to their disparate preparations. "Remember," he advised Kenji, "their upper arms initiate most sequences, creating openings that their lower arms exploit. The vulnerability exists in the transition, that fractional delay between upper and lower movements." Kenji nodded, executing a complex feint followed by a direction change that would exploit precisely such a transition. Like a musical rhythm with a slight hesitation between phrases, "I've been composing counter-melodies all night." Takeshi raised an eyebrow at the unexpected metaphor, but acknowledged its accuracy. An apt comparison. Their combat does follow rhythmic patterns that, once recognized, can be anticipated. "And disrupted," Kenji added with a grin that recaptured some of his usual confidence. "I've never been good at following others' rhythms anyway." As false dawn gave way to true morning light, Miyako arrived carrying a tray of steaming cups. "Medicinal tea," she announced, offering the brew to each warrior in turn. "For clarity of mind and quickening of reflexes." Kenji accepted his portion with exaggerated reverence. "The secret weapon that will ensure our victory, Miyako's magical potions. Perhaps we should have offered some to our star visitors as a peace offering." The old healer's eyes crinkled with amusement. This particular brew might have interesting effects on their alien physiology, though whether beneficial or detrimental, I couldn't say. "Save that experiment for a desperate moment," Takeshi suggested, accepting his own cup with a respectful nod. The tea was bitter but invigorating, its complex herbal notes suggesting ingredients beyond the common medicinals. As they drank, Hiroshi addressed the practical matters at hand. "The first duel will establish precedent for those that follow. Kenji, your performance will determine not just your own survival, but how the aliens perceive human warriors in general." "No pressure, then," the young ronin replied with a wry smile. "You must find balance between demonstrating skill and concealing our full capabilities," Hiroshi continued, unruffled. "Show enough to earn their respect, but not so much that they can analyze and counter our techniques in subsequent duels." "Assume they study everything," Masaru added, his cautious nature leading to worst-case planning. "Every stance, every transition, every breath. What you reveal, they will use against those who follow you." Kenji rolled his eyes. "I'll be sure to develop an entirely new style of swordsmanship mid-duel, then, just to confuse them further." "Your unpredictability is actually an asset here," Takeshi observed. "Your mixed techniques and improvised responses may prove more difficult for them to categorize than traditional forms." This earned a surprised look from Kenji, unaccustomed to having his unorthodox approach praised rather than criticized. Finally, someone appreciates my genius. I said your unpredictability is an asset, Takeshi clarified, with the hint of a smile. Not that it constitutes genius. As the banter continued, Toru approached carrying weapons for final inspection. Beyond Kenji's personal sword, he had prepared several backups, each optimized for different aspects of alien combat. This shorter blade, the blacksmith explained, presenting a weapon intermediate between a wakizashi and katana, may serve better once inside their guard. The reduced length allows faster transition between strikes when dealing with multiple limbs. Kenji tested the weapon with several quick movements. Good balance, almost feels like an extension of the arm rather than a separate tool. As it should, Toru confirmed. I adjusted the fittings to your specifications after yesterday's practice. Daichi, who had maintained his isolated practice throughout these exchanges, finally joined the group. Dawn approaches, he stated simply, nodding toward the eastern sky, where pale light had begun to illuminate scattered clouds. The aliens will expect punctuality. Then let us prepare the final elements, Takeshi decided, signaling for Haru, who waited nearby with Kenji's formal attire. The transformation of the young ronin from practice to ceremony was subtle but significant. His sweat-dampened training clothes were replaced with proper hakama and kimono beneath the armor. His hair, usually casually tied, was secured in the formal samurai style. Even his expression shifted, the habitual irreverence giving way to composed dignity. When fully prepared, Kenji stood before his fellow warriors as the embodiment of his profession. A masterless samurai whose appearance now matched his considerable skill. The effect was striking enough that even Daichi offered a nod of approval. Remember, Takeshi said quietly, as they prepared to depart for the dueling ground. You fight not merely for yourself or even this village, but as representative of all humanity against these hunters from the stars. Whatever happens, maintain the dignity of Earth's warriors. I'll try not to embarrass the species, Kenji replied, though his attempt at humor lacked its usual edge. Beneath the bravado, Takeshi sensed genuine awareness of the responsibility he had assumed. The procession to the dueling ground was conducted with deliberate ceremony. Takeshi led the way, followed by Kenji as the designated combatant. The remaining ronin came next, with Toru, Miyako, and Goro representing the village leadership. Behind them, a selection of villagers carried necessities for the coming encounter: water, medical supplies, replacement weapons. The alien delegation awaited them at the prepared arena, their formation a mirror image of the human procession. Their leader stood foremost, flanked by the champion and commander. Behind them, arranged by apparent rank, stood 5 warriors of varying size and armor decoration. From their midst stepped a figure of medium build whose armor bore distinctive markings unlike the others, not rank insignia or victory trophies, but what appeared to be specialized role designation. Their chosen first combatant, Takeshi observed quietly. Note the armor configuration, lighter than some, suggesting emphasis on speed over power. Good, Kenji murmured. A test of technique rather than brute strength. More interesting that way. The formal exchanges proceeded much as they had during the initial meeting, with ritual gestures substituting for shared language. The alien leader indicated the boundaries of the combat area, then made a series of motions establishing the conditions of victory: combat until submission, incapacitation, or death. When these preliminaries concluded, the designated champions from each side moved into the arena. Up close, Kenji's alien opponent appeared even more otherworldly. Its 4 arms held relaxed yet ready positions, while its mask featured additional sensors focused exclusively on the human swordsman. Though shorter than some of its companions, it still towered over Kenji by nearly a head, its limbs proportionally longer and jointed in ways that human anatomy couldn't replicate. To his credit, Kenji showed no outward sign of intimidation. He performed the formal bow of a samurai entering combat, then assumed his ready stance, unusual in its relatively high position, designed to enable his quick transition style. The alien responded with its own ceremonial preparation, a complex sequence of movements involving all four limbs that nevertheless conveyed clear ritual significance. It then drew two primary weapons, a short staff-like instrument in its upper right hand and a curved blade in its upper left. The lower arms remained empty initially, though Takeshi noted sheaths and holders containing additional weapons attached to its armor. For a moment, human and alien regarded each other across 3 paces of carefully prepared ground. Then, without obvious signal, both moved simultaneously. The alien initiated with a sweeping staff strike from its upper right arm, followed by a probing blade attack from the upper left, exactly the pattern Takeshi had described in their preparations. What made the technique formidable was not these initial movements, but how the lower arms activated milliseconds later, deploying secondary weapons to exploit openings created by the first sequence. But Kenji wasn't where those lower attacks anticipated. He had pivoted laterally while simultaneously dropping lower than human combat typically utilized, passing beneath the staff sweep, while avoiding the zone where secondary attacks would naturally follow. His counter came not as a direct strike, but as a slice across the alien's extended reach, a testing cut that met the armor at an angle designed to assess its resistance. The alien adjusted with remarkable speed, 4 arms reconfiguring their pattern to account for Kenji's unorthodox positioning. A secondary sequence deployed, this one designed for lower targeted opponents, with sweeping attacks that covered multiple potential evasion paths. Kenji met these with a series of deflections rather than blocks, redirecting the alien's considerable force rather than opposing it directly. His blade moved in constant motion, never static, creating a defensive sphere that compensated for his reach disadvantage through superior mobility. From the sidelines, Takeshi observed with professional assessment, noting both the alien's attack patterns and Kenji's adaptive responses. The young ronin was performing exactly as needed in this opening exchange, demonstrating skill sufficient to command respect while revealing little of human swordsmanship's full capabilities. "He's doing well," Hiroshi murmured, his experienced eye recognizing the strategy behind Kenji's apparently chaotic movements. Establishing himself as technically proficient without settling into predictable patterns. Masaru nodded agreement. The alien is still testing, trying to categorize his style. It hasn't yet committed to a serious offensive sequence. In the arena, the initial probing exchanges had evolved into more committed combat. The alien pressed forward with coordinated attacks from all 4 limbs, its weapons tracing complex intersecting patterns designed to overwhelm human defensive capabilities. Kenji responded with increasing intensity of his own, his sword becoming nearly invisible in its speed, supplemented by body movements that utilized the entire dueling space. "Look at the alien observers," Takeshi directed quietly, indicating the commander who stood watching with focused attention. "They're studying his technique, trying to identify patterns they can exploit in future duels." "They'll find that challenging with Kenji," Daiichi commented, surprising the others with his rare positive assessment. His style defies conventional classification. As if to illustrate this point, Kenji executed a maneuver that combined elements of 2 entirely different sword schools. The direct thrust of Ito Ryu blended with the circular redirection characteristic of Shinkajuryu. The hybrid technique momentarily disrupted the alien's 4-armed pattern, creating an opening that Kenji exploited with a quick strike to an arm joint. The blade connected, drawing a spray of greenish fluid. The alien leapt back, clicking rapidly in what might have been surprise or pain. It examined the wound, minor but demonstrably real, then refocused on Kenji with what could only be interpreted as increased respect. What followed was extraordinary to witness. Rather than continuing its established attack patterns, the alien adjusted, adopting a more fluid approach that seemed designed to counter Kenji's unpredictable style. 4 arms began moving independently, yet in coordination, creating defensive and offensive capacities simultaneously. "It's adapting," Masaru observed with concern, learning from each exchange. "As is Kenji," Takeshi pointed out, noting how the young ronin had already modified his footwork to account for the alien's adjusted approach. The combat intensified, both participants now fully engaged in testing each other's capabilities. Kenji abandoned any pretense of traditional form, his movements becoming purely functional, designed for maximum effectiveness regardless of aesthetic or technical orthodoxy. He darted in and out of the alien's reach, his blade finding small openings between armor segments, scoring minor wounds that demonstrated human weapons could indeed penetrate alien defenses. The alien responded with increasing sophistication, its 4-armed technique evolving from standard sequences to improvised combinations that specifically targeted Kenji's unorthodox style. What had begun as formal combat was transforming into a dynamic problem-solving exercise, each participant adapting to the other's adaptations in real time. "He's enjoying himself," Hiroshi noted with mixed admiration and concern, observing Kenji's expression. Indeed, beneath the intense concentration, a hint of Kenji's characteristic grin had emerged. For perhaps the first time in his wandering existence, he had found an opponent who demanded his absolute best without the constraints of traditional human combat forms. The alien, too, seemed to be experiencing its own version of engagement beyond mere duty. Its movements had acquired a quality that suggested not just technical execution, but creative problem-solving, the difference between rote performance and genuine artistry. As the duel approached its 15th minute, longer than most human sword encounters, both combatants had sustained minor injuries. Kenji bore a shallow cut along his left forearm, where an alien blade had penetrated his guard. His opponent displayed several small wounds at joint sections, none serious but cumulatively significant. The dynamic shifted when the alien deployed its lower arms in a new configuration, withdrawing the weapons they had held and instead using them for grappling techniques. This created a hybrid approach, slashing and striking from above while attempting to secure holds from below. Kenji recognized the danger immediately. Against 4 arms, grappling would be suicidal. He increased his mobility, using the entire dueling space to maintain distance while looking for opportunities to target the alien's now exposed lower limbs. The strategy proved effective. When the alien extended for a grappling attempt, Kenji executed a spinning maneuver that brought his blade across the exposed inner joint of a lower left arm. The cut was precise and deep, rendering the limb temporarily useless as green fluid pulsed from the wound. A ripple of reaction passed through the alien observers. Not alarm, but something like approval. Their champion made a gesture to the leader that Takeshi interpreted as acknowledgement of the human's skill. The wounded alien adjusted its approach immediately, compensating for the compromised limb by adopting an asymmetrical fighting style. If anything, this made its attacks more unpredictable, as human defenders were conditioned to expect symmetrical patterns from balanced opponents. Kenji countered with his own asymmetry, adapting a one-handed technique that freed his offhand for defensive deflections when needed. The combat entered a new phase, less about power or speed, and more about tactical problem-solving in real time. "They're well matched," Daichi observed quietly, different physiologies but similar combat intelligence. Takeshi nodded agreement. The alien's four-armed advantage was balanced by Kenji's greater speed and unpredictability. The match had become a test of adaptive capacity rather than pre-existing technique, exactly what was needed to establish humans as worthy opponents in the alien's assessment. The decisive moment came unexpectedly. The alien executed a complex sequence involving simultaneous attacks from 3 functioning limbs, a pattern designed to force Kenji into a predictable evasion. Instead of the expected retreat, however, Kenji stepped directly into the attack pattern, passing between 2 striking limbs to enter the alien's inner defense zone. The maneuver was so counter to standard combat logic that it momentarily disrupted the alien's rhythm. In that fractional hesitation, Kenji delivered a precision strike to the joint, connecting the alien's upper right arm to its torso, the limb controlling its primary weapon. The blade penetrated deeply, severing critical connections within the alien anatomy. The arm didn't detach but hung limp, its weapon clattering to the ground as neural control failed. Combined with the previously injured lower limb, this left the alien with only 2 functioning arms, negating its primary advantage in the contest. Rather than pressing this advantage to lethal conclusion, Kenji stepped back, assuming a ready stance that was clearly defensive rather than aggressive. The gesture was unmistakable across species barriers, an opportunity for honorable conclusion without death. The alien straightened to its full height, assessing both its injuries and its opponent. After a moment's consideration, it performed a complex gesture with its 2 functioning arms, a motion that combined acknowledgement of defeat with recognition of worthy combat. The leader stepped forward, making ceremonial movements that formally concluded the duel. The alien champion followed, approaching Kenji directly. It extended a functioning upper arm, presenting what appeared to be a small token, a crystalline emblem that gleamed with internal light. Kenji accepted the offering with a formal bow, maintaining the dignity Takeshi had advised despite what must have been an overwhelming urge to celebrate. The exchange completed, both duelists withdrew to their respective sides. The first contest formally concluded with human victory. As Kenji rejoined the human delegation, the alien leader made a series of gestures indicating the next duel would occur the following dawn, with combatants to be determined through mutual selection process. The ritual concluded, the alien contingent departed toward their encampment, bearing their wounded warrior with careful support rather than any suggestion of shame. Only when they had disappeared into the forest did Kenji's composed demeanor crack. "Did you see that?" he exclaimed, voice pitched between disbelief and exhilaration. "I actually beat a 4-armed alien swordsman. Master Yagyu can stick his traditional forms where the sun doesn't shine." Takeshi allowed himself a smile at the young ronin's enthusiasm. "You fought exceptionally well, but more importantly, you established humans as worthy opponents in their evaluation." "The crystalline token," Hiroshi noted, indicating the object Kenji still held. "A gesture of respect, presumably." Miyako approached to examine Kenji's injuries, but her attention was drawn to the alien gift. "May I?" she asked, extending a weathered hand. Kenji surrendered the token, watching curiously as the old healer studied it from various angles. "A recording device, perhaps," she suggested, "or simply a symbolic acknowledgement. The scrolls mention similar exchanges in the previous encounter." "Either way," Takeshi observed, "the significance is clear. Kenji's performance has earned their respect, which buys us important advantage in the duels to follow." The return to the village became a modest procession of triumph, with Kenji receiving congratulations from villagers who had observed from a distance. The young ronin accepted these with uncharacteristic modesty, deflecting praise with jokes while minimizing his injuries despite Miyako's insistence on immediate treatment. "It's nothing," he protested, as the old healer examined the cut on his arm. "I've received worse shaving." "You've never shaved properly in your life," Miyako retorted, applying a pungent salve that made Kenji wince despite his bravado. "And alien blades may carry substances unfamiliar to human physiology. Better safe than dying heroically from an infected scratch." By midday, the village had transformed into a center of intensive preparation. The ronin had established rotation schedules for both training and rest, ensuring maximum readiness for the challenges ahead while preventing exhaustion. Toru's forge operated continuously, adjusting weapons based on observations from the morning's duel. Miyako and her assistants prepared medicines specifically designed to address alien-inflicted wounds. In the main training area, the 4 remaining ronin worked through combat scenarios informed by Kenji's experience. The young warrior, despite his injuries, demonstrated the alien fighting patterns with remarkable accuracy, using 2 assistants to approximate the 4-armed technique. "They adapt continuously," he explained, directing the assistants through a sequence. "Not just between duels, but within the combat itself. Every successful technique you employ will be countered in subsequent exchanges." "Then constant innovation becomes necessary," Daiichi concluded, testing a counter sequence with his 2-sword style. "Exactly," Kenji confirmed. "Traditional forms provide foundation, but victory requires improvisation beyond established patterns." Takeshi noted with approval how the duel had tempered Kenji's usual dismissal of formal training. The young ronin now acknowledged the value of traditional foundations, while emphasizing the need to transcend them, a more balanced perspective than his previous categorical rejection. As they trained, Hiroshi focused on specific vulnerabilities in alien physiology. "Joint sections here and here," he indicated on a diagram Takeshi had sketched, "and the connection points between exoskeleton plates. Conventional strikes against the armored sections proved ineffective." "Their blood flows more slowly than ours," Masaru observed, reviewing Miyako's notes from the ancient scrolls. "Wounds that would quickly debilitate a human may only marginally affect them. We must target critical systems rather than rely on blood loss." "The mask apparatus," Takeshi added, indicating the facial area on the diagram. "Kenji's opponent protected this area with particular diligence. It may be vital to their breathing in our atmosphere." Throughout the afternoon, they rotated through various training scenarios, each ronin developing specific counter techniques to the alien fighting style based on his personal approach. Hiroshi recognized patterns in the 4-armed sequences that resembled combined weapon forms he had encountered in continental warfare. He developed responses that utilized his battlefield experience, timing counters to exploit transition points between alien attack phases. Masaru perfected defensive techniques that turned the aliens' strength and reach against them, creating openings through redirection rather than direct opposition. His habitually cautious approach proved well-suited to identifying subtle weaknesses in the 4-armed style. Daiichi's 2-sword method offered unique advantages against multiple-limbed opponents, allowing simultaneous defense and offense that conventional single-blade techniques couldn't match. He developed specific forms targeting the coordination gaps between alien upper and lower arms. Takeshi synthesized elements from each approach, creating integrated responses that could adapt to changing alien tactics. His generalist background allowed him to bridge the specialized techniques of his companions, finding connections between their disparate styles. As evening approached, Kenji's injuries began demanding attention, despite his attempts to ignore them. Miyako finally insisted on proper rest, threatening herbal sedation if necessary. The young ronin reluctantly withdrew to recovery, though not before providing final insights from his combat experience. "They value technical proficiency over simple victory," he noted, as Miyako prepared a healing poultice. "When I demonstrated innovation, Their response wasn't anger, but appreciation. They're seeking worthy challenges, not easy conquests. A perspective with strategic implications, Takeshi observed. It suggests performance matters as much as outcome in their evaluation. Which raises the question, Hiroshi added, of what happens should we demonstrate overwhelming superiority. Would they escalate beyond these ritual parameters? The question hung unanswered as Kenji was led away for treatment, leaving the remaining ronin to continue preparations with this uncertainty in mind. The alien honor code, while providing structure for the current challenges, contained elements they could only partially comprehend, a reminder of the vast differences separating their species despite superficial similarities in warrior ethos. As darkness fell, Takeshi sought private audience with Miyako, bringing several questions that had emerged during the day's training. He found the old healer in her hut, grinding herbs with methodical precision despite her evident fatigue. "You should rest," he suggested, noting the shadows beneath her eyes. "Tomorrow brings another duel." "As should you," she countered without interrupting her work. "Yet here we both are, preparing rather than sleeping." Takeshi acknowledged the point with a slight smile. The herbs Kenji consumed before combat. They seemed to enhance his perception and reflexes beyond normal capacity. "A special preparation," Miyako confirmed, based partially on the ancient scrolls' descriptions of substances used during the previous alien visit. "With side effects?" Takeshi asked directly. The old woman's hands paused momentarily. "Vision quests," the scrolls called them. Enhanced perception accompanied by vivid imagery, some useful in combat, others potentially distracting. Kenji mentioned seeing patterns in the aliens' movements, described them as musical rhythms he could anticipate and counter. Miyako nodded. The preparation affects each warrior differently based on individual mind and spirit. For some, it reveals patterns otherwise invisible. For others, it heightens sensory input to overwhelming levels. And the long-term effects? According to the scrolls, mostly transient. Exhaustion afterward, unusual dreams for several days. She resumed her grinding, adding another root to the mixture. Though prepare for vivid perceptions during the hours of influence. Takeshi considered this information carefully. "And you've prepared this substance for all of us?" "Different variations, adapted to each warrior's nature as I've observed it." Miyako indicated several small containers, each labeled with a ronin's name. Hiroshi's emphasizes clarity of thought over physical enhancement. His experience needs no augmentation, but his trauma-induced hesitation might benefit from balanced perspective. Masaru's counteracts his excessive caution without inducing recklessness. Daiichi's promotes integration between technical mastery and intuitive flow. "And mine?" Takeshi asked, indicating the container bearing his name. Miyako's aged eyes studied him with unexpected intensity. "Yours addresses the division within you, the masterless samurai seeking purpose beyond simple survival. It helps bridge past and present, failure and potential redemption." The insight was uncomfortably precise. Takeshi had shared little of his internal struggle with anyone, yet this village healer had perceived the core of his conflict. "These preparations sound more spiritual than medicinal," he observed neutrally. "Is there truly separation between the two?" Miyako countered. "Body and spirit exist in constant conversation. These herbs merely facilitate clearer exchange between them." Before Takeshi could respond, Toru appeared at the doorway, his expression betraying unusual concern. "You should see this," the blacksmith said without preamble. "At the forest edge." They followed him to the village boundary, where several villagers had gathered, pointing toward the alien encampment. There, visible through gaps in the trees, A figure moved with deliberate stealth. One of the aliens, its distinctive four-armed silhouette unmistakable even in darkness. Observing us, Takeshi surmised, noting how the alien paused to study the village's defensive preparations. Spying before tomorrow's duel, Toru suggested with evident disapproval. Takeshi shook his head slightly. Their honor code wouldn't permit such advantage. He studied the aliens' movements more carefully, noting subtle differences from the warriors they had encountered. This one moves differently, more observation than combat assessment, and see how it focuses on our training methods rather than defenses. Intelligence gathering, Hiroshi concluded, having joined them unnoticed. Learning how we prepare, not what techniques we employ. The commander, Takeshi identified, recognizing the distinctive armor configuration even at distance. The younger leader who marked me specifically during the formal meeting. Should we confront him? Toru asked, hand moving instinctively to the weapon at his belt. Let him observe. Takeshi's decision was immediate and certain. What he learns of our preparation methods reveals little of tactical value, while confrontation might disrupt the ritual framework of the challenge. They watched as the alien commander continued his observation, methodically studying the village from multiple vantage points. His movements displayed not the ceremonial formality of the leader, nor the confident power of the champion, but calculating precision, assessing, analyzing, adapting continuously. He's dangerous in a different way than the others, Hiroshi observed quietly. The leader and champion follow their code rigidly. This one calculates its boundaries and limitations, looking for advantages within its constraints. Like Kenji finding innovation within traditional forms, Takeshi noted, drawing a parallel that provided insight into the alien mind. Their society must balance tradition and adaptation just as ours does. As they watched, the commander completed his observation circuit and withdrew into the forest, disappearing among the shadows with remarkable stealth for his size. The incident concluded without confrontation, but its implications lingered. A reminder that the alien culture, for all its ritual formality, contained its own internal divisions and philosophies. Who faces them tomorrow? Toru asked, as they turned back toward the village. The ronin exchanged glances, the question having remained unresolved during the day's intensive preparations. Each had trained as though he would be next, but no formal selection had been made. I will, Masaru stated with uncharacteristic directness. My defensive focus provides opportunity to observe more of their techniques while revealing less of our offensive capabilities. A sound strategic assessment, Hiroshi acknowledged, though his expression suggested he had been prepared to volunteer himself. Then we adjust tomorrow's preparations accordingly, Takeshi decided. Masaru will face their selected champion while the rest of us continue developing counter-techniques based on today's observations. As they moved to implement this plan, distant lights pulsed from the alien encampment, rhythmic patterns suggesting ceremony or communication. The extraterrestrial visitors were conducting their own preparations, selecting their next champion, and developing strategies based on Kenji's unexpected victory. 5 days, Hiroshi reminded them quietly. 5 duels that will determine not just our survival, but humanity's standing among the stars. 1 victory achieved, Takeshi responded with measured optimism. The path forward revealed 1 step at a time. The ronin dispersed to their final preparations. Masaru to meditative centering, Hiroshi to tactical planning, Takeshi to integration of the day's lessons. Behind them, the village continued its transformation from agricultural settlement to fortress, its inhabitants rising to extraordinary challenge with courage that belied their ordinary circumstances. And beyond the forest, beyond Earth itself, the vast universe watched, countless worlds where intelligent life had evolved along different paths, yet somehow converged on similar questions of honor, purpose, and the meaning of worthy combat across the endless void between stars.